Okay, and here we go. Hi, everybody. What is up, you beautiful YouTube mother lovers? Screw you, Brandon. What the hell? If you could steal from PewDiePie, I could steal from you, so shut up. Anyway, hello, everybody on YouTube. It is me, Joe, and I am back with another live reaction to LazerPig, because the guy's funny, and basically, I like him. He's fun, and you guys want to see some more of him, so we're doing this. And for some of you who are asking, why am I doing this a day early? Don't I do this on a Sunday? Well, that's just my decision. I want to do this. It's fun, and it's fun. So anyone who doesn't like that, well, that's just tough bacon. Oh, sorry, pig. Anyway, I've been seeing a lot of people saying go to watch his defense of the Crusader tank, because that one was funny. And I find that curious. Because the Crusader was an okay tank. It was decent during World War II. It was actually pretty famous. I mean, let's just face it, the fucking memes about the Crusader tank. I mean, come on, Crusader. We shall take Jerusalem. Hello, everybody. Hello, Simpson. Yeah, so today we're going to check out LazerPig's and his defense of the Crusader tank. So let's see what the pig has in store. Let's get this video started.
Hi. Do you like pigs? Do you like LazerPig? Do you like invading his privacy at 4 in the morning and getting into his house where he does all his disgusting breakfast crimes? Don't judge me!
Whoa! What was that crime? What was that fucking crime? What was it? Is that a fucking Hawaiian pizza with beets and Tabasco sauce? Pig! What the fuck is that? One moment. We shall see about this. We shall see about pursuing days. Today we're talking about Crusaders. So let's see.
Breakfast crimes? Don't judge me. Do you
I will judge you.
50 million questions and then getting angry when he doesn't instantly respond? Have I said something incorrect in one of my videos and you're just desperate to make sure that I'm aware of it? Are you one of the several hundred people every day who email me asking for help with your history homework? I wish there was a more personalized way you could contact me other than my email address, which is for business inquiries only, guys. Seriously. Well, shut your fucks up, because now I finally have a Discord. Yes,
oh, I'm so sorry for you.
Finally at me in public and annoy me by causing my computer to make sounds and flash a red number at me to let me personally know that you want to talk to me. And I need to drop everything to read what you said.
This is...
Link in the description. So come now before I realize what a horrible mistake this whole thing was and delete it. Anyway, video beginneth. So you know how I said I wasn't going to do a video on the Crusader tank anytime soon? I lied. British tanks.
British tanks. The horror.
Look at them. The sheer raw power of British engineering. Christ, look at that. Would want to meet that one in a dark alley. But why are British tanks? Well, Britain has 3 ways of winning wars. First is to make sure your officer corps is stuffed full of decrepit old inbred rich posh layabouts who know more about table manners than tactics.
Wow.
Rome by throwing soldiers at it, suffer massive casualties, retreat, shout huzzah, and then claim victory anyway. Second is to put someone actually competent in charge, who brings the full power and might of Britannia crashing down upon the problem in a way that really shouldn't work, but somehow does.
Basically just dumb luck.
Is to say you'll help, let your ally do all the fighting, retreat when it goes badly, and then just Wallace and Gromit your way out of the situation.
Wallace and Gromit!
That is pretty much what Britain did in the Second World War.
Yeah, pretty much.
Surrounded on all sides with no army, no resources, a starving populace, a land invasion imminent, the sky filled with enemy bombers, the ocean with submarines, and an economy built by pacifists and based on the idea that a world war would never happen again. Britain was desperate. And in that desperation, they birthed an idea. To defeat the Nazis, they would construct an elaborate series of contraptions, which they did. From the great beach-climbing rocket-powered Panzerdrum, to the handheld spring-mortar anti-tank Piat, to the rocket-propelled aerial minefield with the mines and little parachutes, that is a thing that does exist, to the flying jeep, a bomb that could cause earthquakes, and most famously, an aircraft carrier made out of ice.
Okay, yeah, this is fucking true. This fucking almost existed. Yes, That's right. An aircraft carrier made entirely of ice. It was called the Habakkuk. It was literally supposed to be this giant floating aircraft carrier that was big enough to handle Lancaster bombers. I am not even making this up. This thing almost actually fucking existed. There was actually a prototype built of this thing. It was it was like only like 1/10 or even less than that. The actual fucking site was really just a hut built on some ice. And basically, oh my god, I cannot, like, this thing, as cool as this thing is, what the fuck, Britain? What the actual fuck? Oh, god damn it, though, this thing would have been cool to look at.
Some of these worked, most of them did not, because they were the work of mental people. And British tanks sort of follow this exact same pattern. Each design is built by a separate madman, each attempting to fix a problem they assume to be what a modern battle will entail, and each going about it in a complete...
Okay, I just saw this. I'm a little... Okay, before I get corrected in the comments, out of ice, that's only half of it. It was basically, this aircraft carrier was made out of something called icecrete. It's basically like mixing ice, water, and wood, and like sawdust, and then freezing it, and that... Or, you know, it's called pykrete. And, yeah, so it's basically like mixing sawdust and fucking ice and mixing it together. And that makes it stronger and melts a lot slower. In fact, it might take years to melt if properly maintained. So, that's what it was supposed to be. Anyway, British tanks.
Completely different way, and British generals were not exactly helping the situation. Because they've been quick to accept and even pioneer the idea of mechanized warfare, something commonly mislabeled as blitzkrieg and attributed to the Germans, but the idea of exactly what kind of tank this style of warfare would require was not hugely understood. Now, you'd be wrong to think that there was an argument at the War Office which led to the compromise of cavalry and infantry tank development proceeding in different directions, fast tank to replace the cavalry, and so on and so forth. No. They'd all agreed that what they were doing was the best way. The problem was the cavalry was refusing to give up their horses, and had to be bullied into it, and only finally mechanizing all cavalry units in Britain in 1939, though it would be well into 1942 before this included all foreign legions, with the last great cavalry charge of the British Empire occurring in Burma in 1942, when the Burmese frontier force, consisting of cavalry from India, granted led by the British, charged the Japanese. It went about as well as you expect. But yeah,
I expect a massacre. Oh my... Oh yes, I'm going to charge forward with my little saber and my sword, and I'm going to charge at that roving monstrosity of steel and machine guns. God, that sounds like what the fucking Cossacks would do. Oh my god, I want the Russian Cossacks to mount up on their horses and all their... We're going to go liberate Ukraine for Putin. We're going to go with our horses and we're going to go butcher and slaughter and... Oh shit, the Ukrainians have machine guns and tanks. Oh fuck. I want to see that happen. But... did these idiots not learn anything from World War I? Oh... I guess he was right about their officer corps being full of a bunch of posh inbred layabouts. Oh.
Yes, several of the British divisions, upon arriving in Africa in 1941, still had horses with them.
What?
By then, they were mostly...
Not even I knew that!
...pulling things or as pets. I'm an officer. I get to have my bloody horse with me if I want. You can't take it away from me. No. I should write a letter to the king himself. It's as I imagine.
This is why I think there needs to be a mandatory retirement age, and it should not be fucking 80. Make it like 60. Everyone must retire by the time they're 60. Can we all agree to that? So that way these old farts just don't keep holding us up. Jesus. Retire at 60. Live the good life. Sell your porch. Drink your mint julep and shut up. God, retire! Oh, ugh. Next. Continue.
At the time. Anyway, so Britain wanted fast tanks doing what the cavalry always pretty much did. Flank attacks, breakthroughs, scouting, etc., etc.
Fair.
So speed was essential. But it also wants infantry tanks for supporting infantry, which, in spite of recognizing the future of warfare and the direction it was going on, decide that speed is not essential. I mean, quite literally, in every design spec considered by the Ministry of Defense, being able to cross trenches and having more machine guns than the typical American strapped to it were more desirable traits
Okay,
if
Al,
Iran could
that's
actually
true.
move. Since, as they reckoned, in our future warfare of mechanized troops performing large-scale flanking and breakthrough maneuvers to capture objectives, secure supply lines, and encircle the enemy, why would anyone be traveling faster than walking pace? This kind of thought led to the TOG, which, there that is.
The TOG. The ultimate meme tank. Oh yes, we're just simply going to be walking in great lines and great columns, just at a brisk marching pace. God damn it, England! You all make fun of us! Well, now we get to make fun of you. Cause look at that thing. Oh yes, walking about. God, when did Blackadder Goes Forth get right? God, when did it become a history documentary? That was supposed to be comedy! God almighty. Oh.
And the Matilda.
Oh God.
Everyone in Britain was shitting themselves over just how expensive tank warfare might become, and we barely have any tanks. Rapidly produce the cheapest tank you possibly can, give it a ludicrous amount of armor, a one-man turret, and a machine gun. Because why would it need anything else? It's shooting at infantry. What do you mean cover? Why would they take cover? That's not very sporting of them, is it?
Sporting?
Top speed of the thing.
Okay, rant time, because this one's really making my blood boil, because I have to deal, this is all about old farts holding up the war. Not very sporting of them. Motherfucker, in war, sporting and rules go out the fucking window. I hate this mentality of, oh yes, we must have a gentlemanly war, gentlemanly. God almighty, how long? 44 minutes. Oh, we are gonna be here a while. This video is easily gonna be pushing an hour. Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't want to be here for an hour or more, because 10 bucks says this is from just the fact that I've already gone on like 3 or 4 rants already, we're gonna be here a while. So, if you don't want to stick around, feel free to click out of this video. I have a whole channel of other videos to go check out and watch and enjoy. But if you want to stick around for the long haul and enjoy my rants on the maniaccuracy of history, by all means, get some popcorn, get a snack, get a nice tall drink or something, or hell, go make dinner. You might want to go make dinner. We'll probably only be halfway through this by the time you've cooked a full course meal. But yeah, if you want to stick around, by all means, we're going to be here a bit. Hell, order a pizza. It'll probably be here when we're about a quarter of the way through. Alright, buckle up, folks. Oh, this is gonna suck. Sporting and rules in war. God. Yes, we're going to make these rules of war so that way we are the ones that win. Isn't that always the case of people? Oh, yeah. Far from gentlemanly. I was a reenactor. Everything went out the fucking window when it came to war. Even we may have only been like a little bit, but yeah. Yeah, like literally. Oh yes, you Americans, yes, I understand you're separated from your command structure, so here's the thing. You see those MG-42s over there? Yes, charge them. Oh, they'll only kill about 90% of you. Yeah, okay. I gotta tell you the story. When I was a reenactor once upon a time, when I was still living in Cali, I was taking part in a reenactment of Operation Market Garden, where our job was basically to go and liberate a bunch of British paratroopers that were caught behind German lines and were currently surrounded. So our job as 101st Airborne was to go get them and bring them out. Well, when we got there, we were completely separated from our command structure. So all our officers got split up because we encountered German resistance and we split off. So our officers went with one group and we were stuck with mostly our non-coms, specifically corporals. I'm in the machine gun squad, so I'm working with the guys packing ammo for the 1919, and we come upon the British. And they're like, oh, we understand you have no officers, but listen, we need to not... retreat is not an option. No, 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 no. We have to advance through the enemy lines. To which point, I literally have to... We have to point out, like, excuse me, Lieutenant. Those are fucking MG-42s! We'll be shredded to bits! But they're like, oh yes, of course, yes, they are. But yes, we're going to charge those machine guns. To which point, the Brits charge into those machine guns and are completely wiped out. Where are we? No, we're surrounded by the fucking Germans! We're fucking surrounded! So yeah, me, machine gun squad, and about maybe 2 other rifle squads, no officers, no sergeants, just a fucking corporal, are currently surrounded. So what do? We have to set up and wait. Meanwhile, having blanks, which, let me tell you this, I mean, yeah, they're not real bullets, but they're still blanks, but you can still hear the bursts of air going right over your head, and let me tell you something, that's still fucking scary, and that shit actually does still hurt. You will feel that air hit you, and it will definitely make you feel something. It will hurt, especially if you're too close. And no, these guys are about, maybe 50 yards away. Oh, goddamn the British. And these were American reenactors, but they played it too fucking well. God almighty. Continuing on with tanks.
Is somewhere between a turtle and the walking pace of an elderly couple when you're trying to get past them in the shopping aisle. However, having been forced to leave behind all of its equipment in France, and with invasion seemingly mere days away, and nothing to fight back with outside of a polite yet stern letter, a lot of British tanks produced in this era would be ordered in a panic off the drawing board, with no real evaluation as to their capabilities. Examples being the Matilda II and the Valentine respectively. Now, the Crusader was put through trials, but it was only ever matched against its direct and awful competitor, the Conventor tank. This one. Seen here, forklifting a Churchill after his daily 12th champagne bottle breakfast buffet. This footage, by the way, is from a British propaganda film, in which every time Churchill appears on screen, there is rapturous applause. Applaud! Applaud when you see the great leader! No, not that one!
Definitely not that one!
That thing, after its design was rejected for frontline use, Britain had about 300 of them just, sitting about. They were mainly used for training.
Good!
So came up with the idea of a Home Guard armored division. For those of you who don't know, the Home Guard were a large group of volunteers, originally called the LDV, or the Local Defense Volunteers, but most famously were known as Dad's Army. They were made up of people too ill or too old, or sometimes just too young, to join the regular army, who in lieu of equipment, were to creatively defend the nation during an invasion, leading them to raiding museums and pushing everything from trebuchets, crossbows, and black powder cannons into service, or to strapping boilerplates to your car. I'll maybe do a video in the future about this, because honestly the weird and wacky and psychotic world of the LDV does not get enough attention. Now honestly, sometimes I wish Germany had invaded Great Britain, just for the comedic Wallace and Gromit shenanigans that would have ensued. But anyway, British tanks.
Okay. This fucking Dad's armies? Are you fucking kidding? The predecessor to the fucking Boogaloo Boys. I swear to God. Oh my fucking God almighty. Continuing on before I go down a political rant, please.
So, where the fuck do you begin?
How the fuck is
this? You start at 1920s and you build this gigantic tank with a lot of turrets. And then you realize that's dumb, so you take the turrets off. Now put them back on. Now take them off again. Now put one back on. Now take it off. Now that is British tank design in a nutshell. And I have admitted before, and I shall do so again, I used to be a bit of a teaboo. I know, how dare I? But thing is, back then, anything popular and World War II based was always America this, America that, here's Germany, and if we're lucky, the Russians will get a mention.
That's fair.
As far as the main bulk of the shit show that was the
That's
military enthusiast community, as it was back then, Britain might have well done nothing in World War II. America rode in, saved its ass like it did in the First World War, and how dare we complain, because tiny islands, size of Texas, blah 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 blah, etc, etc. I'll give you an example of how bad this was. Company of Heroes, not the first one, not the shit second one, had an expansion that added 2 new factions. The Panzer Elite, and the British. And would you believe, in some multiplayer matches, I would get booted out for playing as the British, because only dumb people play as Britain. This was until everyone realised that the British RT Doctrine path is the most OP thing in the existence of that game. You build 3 25-pounders and just nuke your enemy into rage quitting. Anyway, when you are British, and you're in that environment, you start to develop mentality. And that mentality is, fuck you, America. I shall defend the honor of my nation. Keyboard warriors, assemble!
Brother, you go up against me, you fucking Brent? Are you kidding me? Brother, I'll make the fucking Revolutionary and the War of 1812 look like fucking picnics. American keyboard warriors, assemble! We shall defeat the island of Britain. Down the British. Down with the king. We don't need them.
So, it's taken a long time to kind of, just dial that back a bit, history. So, problems of British tanks. And yes, I know this video is supposed to be in defense
look at
of the
those
Crusader.
things.
I'm getting there. Shush. Problems of British tank start with the 1924 Railways Act.
What?
Only the top tier excitement on this channel. And now, this is an act that is absolutely 100% not trying to prevent big American truck companies from making the railway obsolete by making it law that any cargo over 4 tons has to travel by rail, which was great for...
Well, Ko, I'm sorry to tell you this, buddy, but by the 1924 Train Act, you have to travel by rail. I can't take you by car.
For the railways,
Just had to
we
make
got
that
to
jump
keep
once.
building obsolete steam trains right up to the 1970s, until suddenly had to replace them all with diesel trains in a time where any random fucker
I thought
could
I
just
was
walk
done
into
with
the Department of
trains.
Transport with a crayon drawing and say,
Guess not.
"I've designed train," and British Rail would go, "Great, build us 300, please." Which is why when it comes to British diesel trains of the 1970s and 80s, there are so many of them, and they're all weird as fuck. So, good for the railway companies, but bad if a war suddenly happened and you suddenly needed a lot of tanks and trucks and armoured cars and various other things, and that's a bit of an issue when you find that the biggest thing your country has produced is a 3-ton Bedford. Fun. Now, add to this fact that Britain had lost all of its equipment, and I mean all of its equipment in France.
This I
and
do know.
Suddenly a
Yeah.
lot of pressure was applied
All their
to an
equipment
economy
gone.
that had been built by pacifists on the understanding that another world war would never happen until everyone in the current government was either dead or couldn't take the blame. Add to that the very sudden material shortage, a food shortage, and you're being blockaded by one of the most efficient and ruthless U-boat navies in the world, and then Germany starts invading you. And you can imagine why, when Britain took stock of its situation, just a little bit of poo came out.
I think more than a little bit,
All
Pig.
the Enfield rifles Britain took to France, that was all of them. That was all they had. They could build more of them, but the factory that had built them had expanded during World War I, but during the interwar period, it had really only produced limited runs of experimental rifles. 100 here, 100 here, that the British really didn't want because they were just too expensive. And now suddenly they had to build hundreds and thousands of new rifles, plus all the ammunition that they needed, just when all their workers had been drafted into the army. So ammunition,
And now several of them
Britain
were
was a
captured
little
over
bit
in
short
Germany.
Supply. So short supply, I'll give you another example here. Britain had this ring of steel that looped around London and
Yes,
formed
the
a
ring of
defensive
steel.
perimeter right up to about the north of England. Every gun Britain had was on this line, from leftover anti-tank guns, old World War I artillery guns, to guns that had been ripped off decommissioned warships. Each gun on average, so keep in mind that means half of them had less than this, 10 shells each. So,
I'm sorry, what? 10 shells? Just 10? it's more effective just to stand on the beast and shake your fist at people. How is it? Brother, this wasn't a ring of steel, this was a ring of aluminum! Or, oh, I'm sorry, England. Aluminium. What the hell? God.
Germany had the capability and invaded right there and then. Britain's chances of holding out were about as fucked as a femboy at a furry convention. Thankfully, they didn't. Germany proclaimed it needed total air superiority before a land invasion could begin.
Wow.
And Operation Silo was more of an intimidation tactic, not an actual battle plan.
True.
So, with no army, no air force, a navy that desperately needed more destroyers to escort convoys, and now an air invasion underway.
Oh, look, the blubber. Look, everybody, a giant walrus has decided to come down from the North Sea and blubber its way onto the shores of France. Oh, wait, that's Hermann Goering. No, actually, no, it's really no difference. It is just a blubbering walrus. How was he ever a fucking fighter ace? What they had to do, forklift him into his aircraft in World War I? Probably. Oh, no. Oh, hi, Hans. It's Herman. Okay, get the entire motor pool and about the 3rd Division in here. We need to hoist his ass into a fucking airplane. God, how is... God, fucking A, this guy was fucking asshole fat. Necked.
Very, very quickly.
Look at him.
And priority was given to aircraft and warships.
Yes.
Tanks had to make do with whatever was left over, which was train factories, and you know, we've been over that. Oh, that chicken in the ass, stick a deck chair up your nose. Alright, fine. So the British cruiser tank starts off with the A9. This was designed to be cheap, easy to produce, and have as many off-the-shelf components as possible. It was thinly armoured, and though accepted and put into service as the Cruiser Mark I, only about 100 were ever built, before being replaced by the Mark II. This removed the stupid frontal turrets and up-armoured the entire vehicle. But it wouldn't be until a little later that the British became interested in something called the Christie suspension.
Oh, God!
Boy. Experiments with the Christie design led to the A-13, a Cruiser Mark III, the cutest tank ever built, and honestly a personal favourite of mine. Honestly, I don't play War Thunder anymore, but when I did, this was the tank I'd dick around in. I love it. The A-13 was fast and combined that speed with a pretty decent, at the time, 2-pounder gun, making it everything Britain wanted in a cruiser tank that was eventually upgraded and mass-produced with the additional spaced armour. But it still wasn't enough. The Brits were concerned that though their tanks could be fast, that thin armour would make them vulnerable to anti-tank rifles, to which was said a tank can be as fast as it wants, but no tank can be faster than a speeding bullet. So Nuffield Liberty was contracted to come up with some designs.
Favorite era of European uniforms? I'm always a fan of, like, the Victorian era stuff. That's usually my style. But we're not here to talk about uniforms, Sean. We're here to talk about and make fun of British tanks.
Binding their engine with the Christie suspension to create a sort of medium cruiser tank, one that was fast, armed with a 2-pounder, and had a Christie suspension. Oh, God. So, the two results, in fact, were the
Covenanter
and the Crusader, with the Crusader becoming the favourite choice, because the Covenanter was a fucking piece of shit. Now, when you hear tales of the Crusader, you could be forgiven for thinking that this is the most unreliable tank in history, as anyone who talks about it immediately starts with how unreliable it was, as if every other tank at the time wasn't also suffering reliability issues. Even David Fletcher, Tank Jesus, during a tank chat on the Crusader, cannot resist but talk about its reliability issues. And the thing is, that's not untrue. This tank was forever breaking down, and the main factor behind it was the air filters, which were located on the outside and were in the perfect position that when the tank moved through the loose ground, huge dust clouds got kicked up behind it, and that would just blow straight into the air filters and clog them up. Yeah. Now, this was not unique to the Crusader.
Like what manufacturer's like, oh, where are the air filters to let the engine breathe? Oh, they're on the very back because this thing isn't going to be driving in a desert, is it? Oh, no. No, it shall not be driving in a desert. That would be unsporting now, wouldn't it? Yes. Oh, by the way, where are we going? Where are these tanks being sent? Oh, they're going to North Africa. I'm pretty sure the designer, or the builders, when they heard that, They just dropped all their tools and went, what a fucking moron. What is it, Jeremy? You pillock? Or is that fucking May's line? Fucking you infantile pillock! God damn it. On the fucking back? God.
I mean, there has been such a huge emphasis that has been placed on this being something that the British, and only the British, suffered. But of course, the Germans suffered it too. Or did it never occur to
Oh, I know that!
Thugs in the desert. Now, again, this is just going back to the double standard of historians. German tanks were commonly known to be unreliable under stress and had difficulty coping with the harsh terrain, unless they were in the desert, where they worked perfectly all the time. Now, why is this? Now, believe it or not, there is not a lot of information out there from the German perspective, and a lot of what we do have comes from a very specific source.
Let me guess.
The source is, and has remained, the biggest source of disinformation of the Africa
I'm
campaign.
gonna guess.
Despite numerous attempts to prove that what it says is a lot of bullshit, it has remained one of the biggest checked-out items at the Imperial War Museum where it is housed. Item number 5668 if you want to go check yourself. It was published as a book, translated into numerous languages, and is even for sale at the Tank Museum. The Diaries of one
Yup!
Rommel.
What the hell? The desert cop. Wow.
The myths that surround Erwin Rommel could fill.
Okay, hold up. Before this gets started, okay, yes, Erwin Rommel. A lot of, oh boy. Well, here's something from a guy who's researched Erwin Rommel. I own his book. I own his actual written book, Infantry Attacks, by Erwin Rommel. I have studied that thing voraciously. Is he a good general? Yes. Is he everything that the myth and the legend says he is? No. I mean, yeah, he's good. He's a damn fine general. But here's the thing. He was just... as much as I like him, oh, God. But he's not everything his myth says he is. Like, I mean, like, this guy is... Yeah. Like, he's like, oh, he was just on the wrong... Not really. He was a firm believer in Germany. He was a firm patriot. Oh, but he didn't commit any war crimes. He kind of did here and there. Yeah, there were instances. While I will say he committed fewer than most, yeah, he did commit some war crimes. He would have been standing trial at Nuremberg if he had survived the war. He would have been at Nuremberg. He would have been there, and he probably would have had some prison time. Was he everything that the myth is cracked up? No. So yeah, Rommel is... He's a decent military commander. He's damn good when it comes to tactics. Definitely someone worth studying, but don't immediately think that this guy is basically like Panzer Division Jesus. He is not. As much as I hate to say it, I'd actually have to say, like, the best tank commander during World War II. Oh, this kills me to say it! This kills me! Oh, I hate this. Oh, I hate that I'm going to have to say this. It's going to be recorded. The best tank commander of World War II. The best one who, when he is solely commanding tanks, he is damn good. Montgomery. Oh, that hurts. Oh. Oh, God. Goddamn. Oh. Oh. Oh, God. Oh, I need some. Oh, God. Oh, God. Oh, God. I need this. Oh. I can't believe I just fucking said that. I can't believe I just said fucking Monty was the best tank commander. Oh. Oh, that hurts. Oh. God, I need some help with that. Oh. 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 I'm talking as a historical I'm talking as a historian. History is not kind. Here's the one thing I have to say. History is not kind to anybody. This is the main reason I don't have a history degree. This is the main reason I don't. When you're going through college, you basically have to choose a side. History does not choose a side. History makes everybody look like assholes. And it comes down... Basically, history is like a court system. You whittle things down until you come to one realization, the truth. The truth of the matter is... the Rommel and Patton and Awesome and Zhukov, they were they were good commanders. They did their job. They were there where we needed. The best commander of World War II has to be Monty. Oh, that hurts. That physically killed a piece of my soul to say that. Oh. Ooh. Ugh. Whew. Okay. Oh my god. Ooh, that hurt. Okay, let's continue on before I have another heart attack.
The library. He deserves a video all of his own. Don't worry, his time will come. But for all his reputation as a military strategical genius, his real genius was in propaganda.
Yeah.
Cameras back in Germany loved him, and Goebbels found that film reels showing the setting of the African sun, glinting of well-presented tank formations, was far more romantic and far more appealing to audiences than the barren steppes of Russia and troops fighting through mud and rain. Goebbels would turn the entire Africa campaign into a propaganda war. Rommel would be given his own camera team with each and every shot reviewed by Rommel himself. If the lighting was wrong or if he didn't look heroic enough, the entire scene was reshot. Rommel has been given something very few of us will ever have in our lives. He got to write his own legacy. Every piece of footage, every report which mentioned him, even his own diaries, were carefully curated to create the story of the Desert Fox.
Sound familiar? We're still doing it today!
Brilliance and heroics, despised by the other generals for not being Bavarian, and cast out to the desert with second-rate equipment and soldiers, in which he would mold into an elite force and fight a hellish war against the British, outsmarting them at every move, blaming his failures on the generals sent to supervise him, who would...
The reason Rommel was kicking butt in Africa in the beginning is because that Monty hadn't shown up. The reason he defeated the Americans at Kasserine Pass is they were under the command of a British general who was a little too clever for his own good. But once Monty really started getting involved, that's when Rommel really started losing. In fact, Patton, contrary to popular belief, Patton and Rommel never met. They never met in battle. Never. As much as Patton and Rommel wanted to fight each other and go head to head, they never did. The closest they ever came were in dispatches. That was literally it. Oh, Goebbels was a Nazi taking mascot. Oh, Sean, I'm gonna remember that.
Squabble over resources, and the Italians. Now,
The
Hitler
Italians
saw
sucked.
the Desert War as a less important secondary front, and with his attention entirely focused on Russia, Rommel was pretty much allowed to do as he pleased, provided the reports which came back were always good news. His legacy was allowed to continue largely unquestioned, and after the war, and with West Germany now a founding part of the NATO alliance, the public, who had gone for years both hating and fearing Germany, had to now suddenly reverse and start liking them again. This is where the idea of the honourable German general, who commanded respect and had nothing to do with any war crimes, became a highly beneficial propaganda piece to help portray our once enemies, now friends. Now it's at this point of history we start to see the division between Germany and the Nazis.
I'll get there,
The media,
CJ.
the SS, and Hitler's elites become the scapegoats and are blamed for some of Hitler's more interesting policies that you're not allowed to talk about on YouTube. And the Wehrmacht, the regular army of Germany, becomes sterilized. They were not the SS, not the Nazis. They were just regular Germans who were misled, and they're actually just regular people like you or me. This is where we get the birth of the Clean Wehrmacht myth. One of the most persistent and annoying myths of the Second World War.
Yeah.
And it also gives birth to the idea of the noble German general. And while many others would publish writings trying to present themselves in a better light, it would be Rommel, who never served on the Eastern Front, who never committed any war crimes.
He did!
And was respectable, well-liked, handsome and cunning, like a fox. And best of all, he wasn't a member of the Nazi Party. May have even been implicated into a plot to kill Hitler, which was totally because he was secretly good, not at all to advance his own political career. Overnight, Rommel goes from being a name on an intelligence report to a worthy adversary. His son is granted numerous awards and becomes friends with both Patton and Montgomery. Rommel, or at least the Rommel his legacy of propaganda has created, becomes the new face of the German army. And if Germany has a few more like him, then the Soviets don't stand a chance. Now this bleeds into our next problem, and it's a big one. As much as Rommel is a work of propaganda, the Americans would go on to produce their own, far worse version.
Oh no!
Patton.
Oh! Oh! Oh, you're killing me, pig!
Patton.
Oh, I need a minute. Oh, God. Oh, you're gonna rip into Patton now? Oh! Oh, this is hurting. Oh, God, I need a drink. Can't believe I'm doing this. Oh... Oh, strap yourselves in, boys. This is gonna hurt. Get the painkillers. We're gonna need them. Oh, this is gonna hurt. Oh. Next.
Is another persona often regaled as being a military genius, feared and respected by the enemy, but in reality was a master of propaganda.
And a big
problem
dick.
Was that support for the war was low. Britain was the old enemy, and while the two had come together briefly at the end of the First World War, it had been an alliance of mutual understanding, and America's position on Europe was a largely economic one. When America officially entered the war after the attacks on Pearl Harbor, you need to understand it hadn't been that long ago that the first battle of the Second World War had taken place in Times Square, over which side America should support.
Yep.
But now, after being war crimed by the Japanese, Americans were naturally frustrated at why American troops were being shipped to a desert on the other side of the world from Japan to deal with an enemy that was, quite frankly, someone else's problem. Most Americans were confused as to why they had to be involved in this war while Japan loomed over them. They considered the European theatre to be a largely British show, and were not in favour of sending people off to die for those slimy redcoats. What the Americans needed was a hero, and Patton gave them just that.
Yes.
A brave, smart-looking, badass tank commander who led from the front, who gave outrageous speeches, who swore and smoked, gosh, how daring, and who didn't listen to his British superiors. The propaganda reels loved him and his image of smart-looking, professional American soldiers. It gave the Americans hope, both at home and in the US Army. It made them feel like they were actually part of the war and fully capable of kicking some ass, as opposed to just helping out the limeys. This all means that the American perspective of the Desert War is typically—
What do you mean when this is over? I've got some right here.
told from his perspective. America talks about America, so what the British were doing before America showed up is largely unimportant. Hence why everything you read about British tanks in the desert, you'll largely hear about how bad it went for the British, how their tanks were too thinly armoured, unreliable and had weak guns up until 1941 in Operation Crusader, when the British get the American M3 Lee, which takes Rommel completely by surprise. Huge victory for the British. And then at the Second Battle of El Alamein, where the British show up with yet another American tank, the Sherman, taking Rommel completely by surprise again. Great victory for the British. But has all of this been taken
pretty much, Sean,
just a little bit out of context?
Yeah.
Now, as much as the emphasis has always been placed on Britain not succeeding until it gets American-built tanks, there's a lot of misconception as to the value those tanks had on Britain's success in the Africa campaign.
Yes.
You see, even before those M3 Lees arrived, Rommel's tanks were not exactly performing well. Though through his diaries, Rommel insists that by the end of 1941, all of his tanks were replaced by the Panzer IIIJ. In actuality, half of his force was Panzer Is and IIs.
Yes.
And out of the Panzer IIIs he did have, less than half were equipped with a longer 50mm gun. Just to correct a common mistake, not all Mark IIIJs have that longer gun. The J designation was for a Panzer III that had been up-armored. The longer gun variant was the L, though some Js did actually have it. See, there's a few sources out there that see Panzer IIIJs being listed as having arrived in Africa and have presumed them to in fact be Ls. It's a minor detail, most people get it right, but it is why you see a lot of discrepancy between Africa Corps tank numbers. Contrary to popular belief, British tanks had very little problems facing off against their German opponents, with both the Crusader and the Panzer III able to kill each other at similar ranges. But, you may exclaim, we have British war diaries, hundreds of them, and a lot of them, especially by tankers, seem absolutely thrilled at getting the idea of an American tank. Okay, so there are two issues here. Firstly, you'd be wrong to assume that the M3 Lee and the Shermans replaced the Crusader tanks in Africa.
Yeah, they didn't.
They did not. Britain had something of a tank shortage.
Yeah, they
so when the
supplemented
Africa
those
War
tanks.
began, everything it had left was being pushed into service. This included the old cruiser models, many of which, because they had done rather well against the Italians and even the early German tanks, remained in service. Thus, British tank units remained a hodgepodge of different tanks, though there were some attempts to standardize this. It wasn't uncommon for a single tank unit to have a Mark I, a Mark II, a Crusader, and a Stuart, all tanks with widely different capabilities and operating styles in one unit. So about half the tanks the British actually had were reserve tanks, not particularly well maintained, falling apart from the harsh desert conditions they were being forced to fight in. So of course they were absolutely overjoyed to be getting something more modern and a hell of a lot more powerful.
Yep.
I mean, if you've been stuck in the desert for over a year with this Mark I cruiser tank rattling all around you, knowing there's less than an inch of hot steel between you, a German shell, and a big box of ammo, if your commander were to come along to you and say, alright, get rid of that thing, here's an M3 Lee, it's like Christmas come early, it's fantastic. The other issue, of course, is that while everyone focuses on the unreliability of the Crusader, it kind of glosses over one of the main issues. The Crusader has a very low profile. It was designed to be as small as possible.
That's true.
Meaning it could be lighter and much harder to hit. This also made
Don't
the
ask
tank
me that, Sean. You're gonna have to ask me to
cramped
choose between
inside.
children.
Not as cramped as the T-34, but still pretty uncomfortable. And probably actually a lot worse than the T-34 because, well, these tanks were made of steel. In a desert, with no air conditioning.
No AC in the desert? Are you kidding me? It's 100 and fucking like 10 or 15 outside my house right now. If my AC goes down, oh motherfucker, I'm loading the dogs in the car and I'm going to the flippin' Arctic. I don't care how long that drive is. I am not staying down here in that heat. But this is like the fucking African desert. In the middle of summer. Jesus, no wonder they were so happy to get those fucking American tanks. They're like, AC! They didn't care if it was more powerful or more armored. They probably just were like, it has air conditioning. Out of my fucking way! God almighty.
I have read, talk about the crew being mostly naked inside. So an American tank that wasn't so cramped was like a dream come true. Finally, I can drive the tank without having to smell my commander's sweaty ballsack.
Yeah!
Of course, the M3 Lee had its own problems. It could not hold down and still...
Oh yeah, the Lee had problems. I mean, look at that thing. Number one, it's named after a loser. Fight me. And number two, you have a 75 millimeter gun that can only go left and right, and a little bit left and right, and up and down. And then you've got a 37 millimeter in a turret. What the fuck? What the actual fuck? Whoever designed that must have been one of those fucking, I'll tell you what, I'm gonna name it the Lee tank, and I'm gonna make it like we would have made it back then. Yeah, basically a tin box with one big cannon and one tiny cannon. Fight me!
Fire its primary gun, its silhouette was stupidly high,
Oh, yeah.
and that main gun was not only difficult to aim.
No, some user. I'm not in the military. I'm just a military historian. My whole life has been lonely. Next.
When attempting to fire on the move, it caused the whole tank to swing violently to the side. It was also a bit of a gas guzzler, and its operational range was far below what the Brits had been used to. The Stuart had a similar problem.
Yeah.
By 1942...
Also the Stuart tank, little tank, also named after a loser. Who, if I remember correctly from my history, was shot by his own men.
The Sherman has arrived. Americans and a lot of Brits like to place emphasis on this being the moment the Brits finally have a tank capable of taking out the German panzers.
Don't talk to me about
As
that,
I
Sean.
said earlier, contrary to popular belief, the British tanks had relatively no issues in dealing with their German counterparts. In fact, in many ways, a lot of British tanks were superior to the things they faced.
That's true.
Panzer Is and IIs were theoretically useless. The Panzer III was a pretty even match, even by the time the newer L models had begun to arrive, which had given the Germans back the advantage in range. The Brits had started to upgrade the Crusaders with a more powerful 6-pounder gun, which negated that advantage. The Mark III Crusader also introduced ventilation fans, a bigger engine with a more powerful water cooling system, which negated that air filter problem, and even thicker armor. The Panzer IV was largely outclassed by everything else, being sluggish and difficult to operate in the terrain, and with that low-velocity 75mm gun, it could barely penetrate anything.
Yeah.
The F2 variant, with its much more powerful and longer 75mm cannon, did help make the Panzer III one of the more deadly tanks of the desert.
I blame you.
But these were prioritized for the Eastern Front, and Rommel would only receive 27 of them. Now, the arrival of the Sherman would coincide with a lot of changes to the way the British operated in the desert. The upgraded Crusader was one of them, along with the introduction of the new Churchill tanks. Matildas were being replaced by the Valentine, etc, etc, etc. But there was one more major, massive change. I know. This is a video about the Crusader. Why am I going back to the T-34? Well, I want to talk to you about the double standards of the lazy historian, briefly. I've mentioned it before, and its meaning isn't really too hard to penetrate. If you were to scroll through the comments on my video about the T-34, you'll find hundreds upon hundreds of people all saying the same thing. Numbers. It's all about numbers. Numbers matter. Blah, 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 blah. Which, you know, if you want to embarrass yourself by saying that, that's fine. I mean, it's bullshit, and I think you know it's bullshit, but let me explain why the T-34 is important here, okay?
Okay, I just have to say this right now. In modern warfare, numbers don't mean jack shit. The only reason numbers ever mattered was during the early days before automatic weaponry. Because back then you were only using either swords, spears, bows and arrows, horses, or muzzle-loading weaponry. When the machine gun was invented, the whole idea of, oh, it's simply about numbers, went out the fucking door and out of the state. The only reason, here's one thing, here's what I'm going to tell you. This is why Germany lost the Eastern Front. They had shit tactics and shitty equipment. The Tiger and Panther were very, very unreliable. The generals running the war over there were morons, more concerned with attending parties and not going to the front, and sending poor little Huns off to go die outside of Stalingrad. Here's the thing. Both sides were doing stupid tactics. The Germans were just making more and more mistakes. That is why the Germany lost the Eastern campaigns. That's why they lost all their campaigns. Horrible tactics, terrible leadership, shitty equipment. Sure, the equipment looks like... We talked about this in the Panther Paradox. He talked about it. It looks good. Doesn't mean it doesn't mean jack. Oh... Historians, God almighty. You see, this is why there's a history bias. Us people who find the truth and talk about it really makes... Here's the thing. If I were to give a history lecture, everyone would walk out of the whole class would walk out after I was done and say, "Man, war is dumb." Yeah. It's almost like it's a waste of time. Think about that for a little bit. Ugh.
You see, the double standard is when talking about the T-34, all anyone can ever talk about is how the Eastern Front was a war of attrition, a numbers war. This is because the average person hasn't sat the fuck down and thought about what that actually means. People don't typically think. Something else tells them what to think, and then they think that thing until something else comes along and contradicts it. And either they change what they think, or they double down and proclaim that the new information must be wrong, because they once heard differently, and that's how you end up with commiboos and theraboos and so on and so forth. I use commiboos instead of tankies because tankies is more of a political reference, and it's an old British term for members of the Communist Party, so I prefer commiboos because I don't know, it sounds more fun, to be honest. Some people like that will happily tell you, yes, the T-34 was a terrible tank, but they sure built a lot of them, and that's what mattered, because numbers matter in a war.
Thanks for
Now,
using double D.
when it comes to Rommel, well, by mid-1941, he has 30 serviceable tanks. The British have 600, and yet he was still winning. He was still winning battles. He was still able to beat back the British in spite of being so ridiculously outnumbered. So to try and explain that, people jump on the first thing they've heard about Rommel. But he was a cunning fox of a man, the Desert Fox, a military tactical genius. And for some reason, the people who say this shit never seem to be able to quite connect the dots. Like they seem to think that Russia didn't have any good generals.
My boy! Yes! Zukov, my boy!
Alright, bad example, but seriously. Well,
shut up.
romance
Zukov
that
was a
surrounds the
decent
African
general too.
campaign
He was
has
decent.
always highlighted it as being an unarmored duel in the sand. The reality was, it was an infantry war, much like every other theater of World War II, regardless of what you might have heard.
They're
from the naval ones, they were not infantry, they were battleships.
Yes, contrary to popular belief, there were only a few major tank battles in World War II. Everyone remembers Kursk, but think about this for a second. For you 8 people watching, how other than Kursk, can you name any other tank battles? I'll wait. Can you? Because they were so few and far between. Mostly all they were was skirmishes. It was infantry handled it down. It's always been infantry. Really, tanks, in my personal opinion, tanks should have just stayed like infantry support. That's really all it really needs to be in some cases. You're goddamn right, Stalin feared Zukov. Zukov was popular.
You get my point. And the tactics of that infantry duel played a far more important role than the sheer number of tanks involved. Rommel was famously a tactician. He had exactly 2 tactics. I mean, in spite of furiously outnumbering the Germans, the British were organized into long defensive lines, for a reason I'll explain.
Battle of the Bulge was really... While tanks were involved, they weren't the majority. It was still primarily infantry. It was actually a pretty even split down the middle. It is considered a tank battle, but it's more infantry when you look at it. It's kind of even down the middle.
In a moment, which relied on static positions stretched out across an entire front. This meant that Rommel could choose one section along that front and concentrate all his forces onto it, overwhelming whatever was there and penetrating enemy lines. His second tactic was to send out a few of his lighter tanks, get the attention of the British, who would rush forward, and then retreat those tanks, and when the British gave chase, he would lure them into a pre-prepared ambush, where his 88mm cannons could just rip the enemy tanks to shreds. Now, Rommel got away with these kind of things for so long because of doctrine. The British Army had a very, very strict doctrine, and deviating from that doctrine was not encouraged, or really allowed. The armoured doctrine the British were following was from the days where tank divisions were cavalry divisions. If the enemy retreated, you followed. They were trained to take advantage of a breakdown in ranks and push through following standard breakthrough protocols. and when under fire from emplaced artillery or guns, they would go hull down. This is where you get your tank, and you find either a ridge to sit behind, or you bury its hull in the dirt and the sand, exposing only the turret. And while such an action made sense in making the tank less of a target, in reality it made the tanks sitting ducks for the 88mm guns, operating at a range far beyond what the Crusaders could realistically counter. And even then, the 2-pounder gun had only armor-piercing ammunition, is the line that normally follows. There was high explosive ammunition available for the 2-pounder, but it has been described to me as next to useless by someone who knows better. Very much like the high explosive ammunition on the 50mm of the Panzer III. Not that anyone talks about how shit that was. Well, it was. Panzer III had about the same capability to deal with British anti-tank guns as a Veribou has to get laid. With an armor-piercing shell and used as an anti-tank gun, which under no circumstances should that ever have been allowed to happen, proved to do quite well. But the arrival of the Sherman coincides with Britain deciding to flip the cards and go for option 2, actually putting someone competent in charge. One Bernard Montgomery.
Oh, again, yeah. Oh. What the hell is that? Oh. There's a reason my channel is 18 plus. Okay, I need to say this right the fuck now. Here's something that really, really a lot of people get wrong about tactics and battle. There's no such thing truly as stupid tactics. What tactics? What battle is? It's a battle of wit, minds, and it's basically it's waiting for your opponent to make a mistake. There are no such things as stupid tactics. If it's stupid and works, it ain't stupid anymore. Battle is all about making a mistake. It's trying to avoid making a mistake long enough for your opponent to make a mistake and then take advantage of that. I'll give you 2 great examples. Snipers and fighter pilots. Snipers, if you'll look up images all over the world of like guys, there are images of soldiers in Iraq, Afghanistan, all over the world. And what they do for like snipers is they take their helmets and make a dummy head, dress it up, put sunglasses on, put the helmet on top, and then stick it outside a window looking around. Well, there's a spotter looking for an enemy sniper to take a shot at the dummy. Now anybody will look at that and go, yeah, right. They're not stupid enough to fall for it. Bang! Oh, look, he did. Spotter finds the sniper. Counter sniper takes him out. Immediately, that's a mistake. If it's stupid but works, it ain't stupid anymore. Same thing with fighter pilots. Fighter pilots are evenly matched in turn. Doesn't matter really on the training. When it comes to a dogfight, it's all about waiting for your enemy to make a mistake. The second your enemy makes a mistake, the other pilot has the advantage. That's what happens. Being on someone's tail doesn't necessarily mean a mistake. It's a tactic. It's an advantage. And you wait for something. Like, say, if someone that's a horrible example because it's really only seen in movies because it looks cool. So I'm going to leave that. But it's all about making a mistake. That's what tactics is all about. That's what chess is all about. Like, literally, you have to wait for someone to make a mistake. Like, take me. Once upon a time, I was actually in a chess match with a Marine. And this guy was not like some little guy. This is a guy who had been in for a while, and we were actually playing a chess game. And I beat him. Now, this guy has been in longer than... Was in the Marines for a whole lot longer. He was older than me. He has a basic understanding of basic combat tactics and understanding it. I'm just some rookie guy. In fact, I'm not even that good at chess. And I still beat him. Because he underestimated me and he left an opening. Now he rechallenged me and then he beat me. He was wary that time and in the end he beat me. But the fact of the first time I beat him because he made the mistake of underestimating me and not taking me seriously, he lost. That's all what tactics are. It's all about waiting for your opponent to make a mistake. The second that mistake happens, they take advantage of it. That's what tactics is. That's what tactics really are. There's no such thing as stupid or superior tactics. They're just tactics. The reason the Germans lost the war, they were making too many mistakes. Too many. And all the other generals, from Patton to Monty to Zhukov, they were all taking advantage of those mistakes. That's how they won. That's how the Allies won. Kind of plays over to today, and it still goes to today. I mean, look at Ukraine. Russia's making a lot of mistakes. Why do you think Ukraine's winning? Back to this. Whew.
Lloyd Auchinleck wasn't a bad commander per se.
No.
I mean, like Rommel, he led from the front, putting around in his Matilda too, but he was a veteran of the First World War. He'd seen an entire generation wiped out and didn't want that to happen again. As a result, he was disinclined to attack the Germans head-on, and preferred to try and whittle the Germans down using heavy defensive fortifications, and only really attacking when he had about a 2-to-1 advantage in numbers. Now this pissed Churchill off. Churchill saw the Africa War as not only a huge drain on resources, but an opportunity to show that Britain still had teeth. Having it go on for years was not an option, and Auchinleck's cautiousness and defensive attitude had allowed Rommel to regroup and rebuild when there had been several points where a single concentrated attack could have wiped him out. Remember how I said by mid-1941 they had 30 tanks to Britain's 600? That was one of them, right after the First Battle of El Alamein, so Auchinleck was sacked. His replacement is stuffed onto a plane, which is immediately shot down, so now Monty is in command. By this time, both sides were exhausted. Supply lines were overstretched, and the soldiers were weak from the harsh desert conditions.
Yep.
Monty's first plan of action was to reorganize the entire army, pulling exhausted units off the front lines and allowing them to rest, and more importantly, bathe. The Brits also began constructing dedicated pits for toilets in their camp. Both of these things would not only improve morale for the troops, and also help prevent disease. The same could not be said for the German side. Most units remaining on the front lines for the duration of the campaign, and at night, when he needed to relieve himself, the honourable, professional, elite and sophisticated German soldier would wander off into the desert and shit wherever he liked, like keeping top table manners by the fucking French. This encouraged flies, which would follow the Germans wherever they went, spreading all sorts of nasty diseases that have really long names. Monty's second plan was to put a stop to all the obvious bullshit the Brits had been falling for. Now when the German tanks retreated, rather than the British falling them into well-placed ambushes, the 88s would be answered with artillery fire and aircraft, quickly turning them from the most feared weapon of the desert into a useless death trap for its crew. He would also enact the idea of a fluid defense, which I shall demonstrate for you on this no-expense spared high-graphics child's drawing program.
Really?
So you got these big blocks defenders like this. In a static defense, they are their dug-ins. You have a lot of concentrated firepower. But like I said, Rommel could just get his entire army, focus on one of these boxes, and just overwhelm whatever was there. Now, a better idea is layered defenses, where you get rows of these boxes overlapping like this.
That is
so if a breakthrough occurs, you've now got 2 defense boxes in front of them. But a fluid defense, something that is still used even today, is you have these boxes, but rather than being full defensive boxes with huge fortifications, they are holdout boxes. They are expected to be able to hold out for a certain amount of time, and between them, you have these large response units, usually tanks, that can move very fast and very quickly and reinforce whatever is under attack, while other response units that are too far away to respond in time can start pushing forward into the counterattack or even an encircle maneuver. Now, I mean, that's the basics of fluid defensive warfare. Now, about 50 people in the comments will tell me, no, you're wrong, that's not how it works. But this is basically what happened to Rommel. I mean, that encirclement failed, but it left him with 20 tanks and barely any trucks. He would end the Africa campaign under siege, with no fuel to mount an offensive, and almost no drinking water to retreat back into the desert.
I need that in the desert.
Summoned back to Germany to personally explain to Hitler the realities of the Africa campaign. Now, of course, there's a lot of details I've glossed over. There's this whole attrition raiding war going on, there's supply lane issues, there's Rommel's feint attacks being exposed by the code-breaking team, the crazy shit the French were up to, the SAS, the combined warfare things the Brits did, the Americans were also there, and Rommel underestimating the Americans would also play a huge part. You may be thinking, LazerPig,
yes, I have.
What the fuck does any of this have to do with the Crusader?
You know.
Alright, shut up. No, I love you, it's fine. Point of all this is that people know some tanks from the Second World War. They have their favourites, and they will have the ones they laugh at. But generally, what they understand about them is the same basic lines that have been repeated to them for the past however many years it's fucking been. This one is unreliable. This one has super thick armor. This one was only good in large numbers. This one was the most effective, and so on, so forth. And we, as enthusiasts, have this very compartmentalized view of wars and battles. We typically see tanks as being independent units, shooting at enemy tanks in a field, and its ability to do that independently becomes the focus of which tank is the best. And we often forget that these units are not designed to work independently, but as part of a larger whole, with infantry support and artillery. That's why idiots, normally some tea-drinking, cardigan-wearing computer IT consultant from the West Coast, using his LinkedIn profile as his YouTube avatar, and probably also his Tinder profile, will sit there and talk at length about how the T-34 won the war for the Russians, which, I mean, if you have the balls to come here in front of all these people and say that with your shit-eating grin, one of the dumbest statements you possibly can, and then act like you've schooled the historian with your facts and logic, that's on you. I can't wait to hear what other pearls of wisdom fart from that mouth of yours. And what next? Oh, it took 5 Shermans to kill a tiger. Actually. Oh my god.
Actually.
If that is you, do me a kindness. Shut, and I cannot stress this enough, the fuck up. Amateurs will often snort at the idea of a tank being designed for infantry support, and back in the bad old days, a lot of people believed that American and British tanks were inferior because they had been designed with the idea of supporting infantry, and that's why German tanks, in quotation marks, were superior, because they'd been designed to fight other tanks. And that belief became the norm, because it was a very simple solution to a very complicated thing. And from that, we just hurtle down this rabbit hole. I mean, I call it the double standard. People hold each tank to a different standard. Examples: the reliability problems of the Panther are paramount to its failure as a tank, but the T-34 gets a free pass. The 2-pounder was awful because it didn't have high explosive rounds, but the Panzer III, which has the same problem, is beloved by many, even though both tanks required very rare variants of other tanks to follow it around, lobbing large artillery shells at things like anti-tank guns, which it just simply could not handle. The Crusader was a fine tank, not perfect. It was cramped, the early ones were badly made, they lacked good sights for the commander, the frontal machine gun turret was useless and hardly ever used, and the later upgun variants reduced the turret from a 3-man to a 2-man operation. But none of these issues are unique to the Crusader.
Nope.
It had decent armor, it was well designed, it was fairly comfortable to ride in, it had a soft steel interior which protected the crew from spalling or those rivets and bolts from bouncing around and maiming the crew. It could actually fire on the move, which made it almost unique. It was fast, it didn't need to have its engine turned over every few hours to stop it seizing up, or have the entire engine lubricated every day to stop it exploding. It had an exceptionally good fuel range, giving it a huge advantage over the German tanks, and it was one of the first tanks to introduce armored storage bins. Very few Crusaders would explode when hit, which meant that most of the crew would survive and go on to crew other tanks, meaning the Brits gained a lot of good experience, and would use that experience in other campaigns. US tankers in the desert highly valued the experience of British tankers because early American training, especially for tankers, just wasn't very good, and many would study British expertise and manuals in those
we learned a
early
lot from the
campaigns, which
Brits.
probably saved a lot of lives. The Crusader has been dealt a bad hand over the years. It's sort of
when I go to England and I go to Bovington, I'm going to go give a Crusader a hug.
And it's the
It
Lee and
needs a
the
hug.
Sherman that end up with all the glory. But I'm hoping now, perhaps I've changed your mind. Maybe now you'll look at the Crusader and understand that, yeah, some things are not as good as people like to claim they are, but some things are not as bad as people like to claim either. Anyway, I've got
perfect,
a tequila
but
fondue
it's
that's been
just
calling my
right.
name for about an hour now. I'm going to go increase my chances of liver failure.
As
Like
am
to come
I.
join me, but I don't want to.
Don't worry, I'll drink with you in spirit.
and I believe it's destroyed.
If I could turn back time, if I could find a way, I'd take back those words that have hurt you, and you'd stay.
Okay, I think we've had enough. Okay, we've had enough. Okay. Oh, this one hurt. This one really hurt. Now I'm gonna go increase my chances for liver failure. Oh, this was a whole lot of fun, though. So, yeah. Wow, an hour and 14 minutes. I told you we'd be here for a while. Oh. So, thank you for joining me on this delightful experience of history. Oh, and to answer that question of, what's my opinion on girls und Panzer? All I have to say is this. Yukari is my spirit animal. Alright, with that, I think I'm gonna call it a day. This has been Joe, and I'm gonna go drink myself into a hole. Good day. You'll know who I am, I know who you are. I will see you all whenever I